Hello everybody, this is Dennis from Learn Internet Grow, and today I'll be demonstrating a pretty simple but very powerful colorization technique that you can use for a variety of media and a variety of applications. And what the technique is, as you can see here, is essentially taking a gradient or a color map and applying it to an existing image to essentially recolor it. Now, as soon as we learn how to do that, I'll just go through another very quick example of how it can be utilized to begin to kind of demonstrate the numerous ways this technique can manifest in different projects, as it is very modular and applicable to nearly anything you can think of, nearly any purpose. Such as you may have seen on Pixelmator's website, their front image, their front banner is a flower that's been recolorized from the center out towards the outer petals, and this is essentially in the same kind of vein that we'll be doing here. So without further ado, let's get started. First, we're going to want to head over to Google, and we're going to need to search up a picture of a flower. So let's do just that. And obviously, image preference is up to you, but there is a very key thing to keep track of, and that is to make sure to choose an image with a relatively high contrast. In other words, this image that I have selected right now has a very low contrast and everything just in the highlights and midtones, and that's actually going to work against us. We need something that's more like this, where there's plenty of shadows, highlights, and boundaries in between that'll give us that resolution and help the colorization kind of dissolve the gradient. We'll see how that works in just a second. So for now, we're going to right-click, copy the image, create a new Photoshop composition, hit OK on that. It just gives you the dimensions right there and then. And we have this flower. Now, next thing, this might seem a little counterintuitive, but we're going to go up to Image, Adjustments, and Black and White, just on the default settings. And what the black and white is going to help us do is this black and white image is essentially going to be the underlayer to the color map, and it needs to be black and white to have for it to actually work that way. Now, before I get started with the coloring, I'm just going to bring up two guidelines here to the edges of the flower on the left and right, and I'm going to crop the image to get rid of some of this background highlight that might be kind of distracting in the final composition. It might detract from the flower as the centerpiece. So up to Image with a marquee around the area we want to keep, and just crop right there. So now we can actually start with the colorization process. We're going to head over to the bottom right here, and we're going to click on the New Layer button to give ourselves a new layer. And with that layer selected, we're going to click on the Gradient tool. If the Gradient tool, if you can't see it, it's going to be underneath your Eraser tool, and it most likely will be hiding under the paint bucket. So just click and hold on that, drag over, and you can select the gradient right there. Now, towards the top left of your screen, you're going to see the gradient preview window. You just click on that, and here you have your gradient editor box up on your screen. So we're going to use a 4-point gradient, essentially, and that means we can click. It actually tells us click to add a stop. We're going to add 2 more points, and we're going to try to kind of mimic the flower that they had on Pixelmator. So we're going to start with something that's more, something yellow orangey, and we're not going to go full saturation on this. When we select the color, we're going to be towards the top in this kind of middle saturation, just to not overload the image with something overly super saturated. Our next color point will be something more orange-red, same kind of saturation there. This one will be purple. That's pretty good. And then the outside one will be more of a blue indigo kind of color. That's good. Oh, strange. Had an extra point there. We're going to do that one more time. There we go. So now that you have these all set up as a gradient, you can just hit OK, and you see it just gets saved right up there. So now what you're going to want to do is go up to the top, and by default you have linear gradient selected. If I drag that, it creates something like this. But our flower's round, so we want it to kind of look like the petals in their various arrangements towards the outer layers are changing color. So we're going to hit the radial gradient arrangement. And we're going to click in the middle of the flower, or somewhere really close to there, and drag out to the edge, release, and we get something like this on our screen. So in order to actually have this color of the black and white underneath, we're going to head over to the Layers box, and in the Blending Modes drop-down, you click in there. It should say Normal as a kind of default, but what you're going to look for is the Color option. So you see when you select that, your image kind of, it's sort of looking closer to the final product. It's colored, but it also really looks washed out and imbalanced, and the center's dark and the outside is light, and the background's all over the place. So we're going to need to obviously fix that. So I'm just going to hide this really quick and go back to our original black and white image. And what you're going to need to find is your adjustments box. The adjustments box should be above your layers, depending on how you have your screen set up. And if you don't see it, just head over to Window at the top, down to Adjustments, click on that. You'll get a check mark there and it'll pop up just as it's supposed to. So the adjustment you're looking for is called Curves, which essentially helps you lighten and darken your image. As a simple example, if I drag this line down, it makes it darker. If I drag it up, it makes it lighter. So we're going to need to make this image a little darker because it looked a little washed out, because it looked a little kind of too bright for its own good. So we're going to take this point and we're going to drag it down, somewhere around here. And we're going to just correct it slightly up there. And essentially now we've got something a little bit more dark, and a little bit, if we just if we turn on this layer here, you can do that with the eyeball. You can see now the petals are more defined, essentially. But the kind of downside is now our middle is way too dark, and there's obviously a way to change that. So click on this curves layer, not in this main box, which allows you to access the curves editor, but instead in the white box here. This is your mask, and this essentially, the white means that all of the image is affected by this adjustment. If, however, you go to your colors here, white is your foreground, but if you switch them so that black is your foreground, and select the brush, you can essentially unselect or deselect some areas of the image so that this effect does not apply to them. So we will do just that. Head over to the top left again, where your brush options are, and make this brush really big. I'm thinking somewhere around 910 pixels. So when you drag it over, it's really large. And I'm going to set the opacity to about 2/3, roughly, and the flow to somewhere around 84, 85. So we're going to now, with black selected, and with this box selected, click in the middle just a few times, and you see how that just lightens up the center of the image. There we go. And this kind of brings our image, this allows this outside to be more contrasty and the middle to be a little brighter, but obviously it's still not quite there yet. Now we're going to go up to above the, or to the gradient, and we're going to hit new layer again so we get a layer above it. And we're going to, with the same kind of brush, we're going to go and find white. And we're going to click in the middle a little bit more. And we're just going to click around. This is where the varied opacity helps, because we need a really smooth gradient. Now what we're doing is making this center a little bit more bright, but obviously we don't want it to be white, so we're going to head over to this magical blending modes option again, but this time we're going to select overlay. So you see how this made the center much, much warmer, much, much brighter, and this is exactly what we need. As you can see on Pixelmator, their center appears to glow, and it actually does because it casts shadows out, and ours does too now. It's nice and bright. If it appears too bright, you could just lower the opacity on the layer, and it won't be so severe. I'm thinking I'm just going to leave it at 85. That looks good. And now one final tweak. We're just going to go hit New Layer again, go back to our gradient, and this time we're going to select the color to transparent to opaque gradient. So we're going to actually shift the color to black on both sides. So just click into the bottom ones, hit into the color, drag it down and make black. And then we're going to want to drag this slider over so that it's about at 52 maybe. And what we're doing is essentially trying to create a vignette around the image so that it creates this kind of, so that the flower recedes into the darkness around the edges, so we're focused even more towards the middle. Now, if we just do this, let's give it a quick test. Oh, it's reversed. If this happens, you could just go up to the top, hit reverse, and then your gradient is reversed. Now this appears a little too dark, so I'm going to go right back to my gradient here, go up towards the top where these are the opacity handles and these are the color handles. The top one on the dark side, we're going to move this towards 75 or so it's not so dark. And we're going to go right back here, drag this out, maybe drag it out a little farther. All right, and there we go. Now we have a flower that looks like it's essentially blooming out of the darkness. And that's really it. You're set. You now know how to recolor images. But just to give you an idea of how really expansive and how versatile this technique is, let's just go to Google real quick one more time. And I'm just going to search up an image of smoke. Now the reason I do this is that you can really apply this technique to anything from black and white portraits to flowers to any kind of image, but it's always best applied on a black background. If you've ever seen these kinds of images, this is essentially how they're done, the technique we just learned. Let's just, for a quick demonstration, I'm going to head over back to Photoshop, copy this image of smoke, paste it into there, create a new layer, grab my brush, I'm just going to put opacity on full for now, and I'm just going to put a few splotches of color. We'll do orange here at the top. We'll do green at the bottom. And essentially, I'm just going to apply the same technique we just learned with the flower and create that really modern-looking, vividly colored smoke. And this technique can really be applied in even more scenarios, but it is really powerful. And to know this trick with the color blending mode can really manifest itself into a whole variety of projects. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this helpful. This has been Dennis from Learn Internet Grow. Thank you very much for watching.